Hello and welcome to BharatShakti.in. I'm Brigadier Chatterji, editor BharatShakti.in. Today we are going to be talking about Afghanistan. Afghanistan is one state, perhaps the whole world's eyes are focused on it. We have a peculiar situation there and an extremely violent one. On one side, the Afghans and the Taliban are talking across the table. On the other side, Taliban continues with its offensive and maybe more and more districts are going to Taliban. But there's news also of a counter-offensive. There's news also of these districts coming back to the Afghan National Forces. So what is the situation today and what can we possibly expect tomorrow? I have with me Maj Gen Harsha Kakar, a known strategic analyst for this show. Welcome to the show, General.
Thank you, sir.
General, let's take off straight away. I think everybody is already on the same page. This issue is being discussed the world over. My first issue is, how do you find the current situation and what do you think will be the future outcome of these talks between Taliban and the Afghan government? Are we going to see better days or are we going to see only more confrontation, more violence?
You see, as far as the talks are concerned, sir, the last round of talks concluded despite the head of the National Reconciliation, Abdullah, flying in for 2 days of intensive talks. They concluded literally with no major headway at all. The Taliban Supreme Leader, Hibatullah Akhundzada, had also stated that the Taliban favors a political settlement. Yet nothing has really been achieved. The reason stems from a number of factors. One is the basic factor remains what should be the name of the country. Should it be Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, which is what it is termed today, or should it be the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is what the Taliban want it to be? From here, once you've determined what the name would be the future progress. You've not been able to push forward here. How much would you expect further movement to take place? You've got to realize, sir, that the talks have been on for over almost a year and a half, but nothing has been achieved. There is a perception from one side that the Taliban is delaying the talks, waiting for the US to pull out so it goes further ahead on its offensive. There is a blame on the Afghan government that it is stalling the talks. Looked at it from either side, the talks have not progressed. There has not been much of a venture forward as far as movement on discussions are concerned. Every group, whether it's led by Russia, whether it's led by China, whether it's led by EU or anywhere else, all have only been favoring a political solution. If you look at the Afghan government's comments, they look at a political solution. The Taliban is mentioning a political solution. But a political solution is nowhere in sight. What appears to be the direction in which it is heading is towards a military solution. So therefore, what we are going to now witness, especially as the date of the US withdrawal goes in closer, after all, they've said that September 11th may be the final date of the withdrawal, but they will possibly complete it by sometime after the mid of August. So what would we expect? We could expect a full-blown civil war to take off within the country. The fight for control of major cities, fight for control of districts. That is the way we're going to see the situation emerging as it will in Afghanistan.
Right, General. I suppose what you said has a lot of weightage, that it's a military solution at the end of the day. Perhaps that is what we are staring at right now. So tell us a little bit about the military situation now. How is Taliban doing and how far has it progressed really?
If I want to take the statement of General Mark Milley, the chairperson of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, when he spoke to reporters, he said that more than 200 out of the 419 district centers were under the Taliban. A month before, they had controlled about 81 district centers. However, they've not been able to take over any provincial capitals. The fact is that in Afghanistan, 80 to 85% of the population live in cities, as compared to about 15 to 20% that are living around the countryside, which the Taliban claim to control. The Afghan army claims it is retaking back the districts which the Taliban had run over, and initially, in some places, even forced the Afghan army to surrender by employing various tactics, including using the local leaders to get them to surrender. But that doesn't appear to be happening. So therefore, there is a very fluid situation. It's very difficult to determine because Taliban claim they control 85% of the country, but there are no provisional capitals. There is nowhere a major city within the Taliban's control. So what they're controlling are possibly some of the border crossings, the hillsides, the countryside. Now, Tajikistan claims that, Taliban claims that it's captured the border crossing with Tajikistan. As a counter, the Tajikistan forces have increased their deployment. Russia has increased its deployment. It claimed to have taken over the border crossing with Pakistan, but again, the Afghan government claims it's taken it back. So the situation remains very fluid. More important in this situation is the growing importance of the militias, which are now gathering steam in the region.
Right. Since you're talking about militias, I think they're a very important factor in this kind of a setup. And it will depend on whether the militia is going to fight for themselves or fight for one side or the other side. I mean, the Afghan government side or maybe the Taliban side. What is the status as far as Taliban's offensive into this militia-held areas are concerned? I'm talking about the bigger ones, at least the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, the Hazaras.
If you look at it, the militia, especially in northern Afghanistan, have actually decided to challenge the Taliban. If you read about them, what comes out evident is that they are being supported by the Afghan government. They're being provided weapons and equipment by the Afghan government. And the fact that they are now getting together, digging in foxholes, occupying defenses, basically to challenge the Taliban. Now, this is changing the scenario as far as the Taliban offensive is concerned. It is now facing a new form of resistance, which is the militia now getting prominent space in northern Afghanistan, especially. Around Mazar-e-Sharif, where the Taliban had a stronghold earlier, the militias have now grabbed it, and now they're holding fort against the Taliban. Now, what in the long term, people have claimed, or those who've been analyzing Afghanistan's history have claimed, that by giving so much power to the militia and by pushing them to challenge the Taliban, ultimately the militias will also be a challenge to state control. So no matter who comes into play in the long term, I'm not looking at anything in the short term, the militias will be powerful enough to ensure that Taliban does not unite as a country. It will never become a nation state, at least anywhere in the midterm. It is going to remain a collection of states with whoever is in Kabul only controlling Kabul and a few other provincial capitals, like with the Afghan government. And militias will continue to control their own. To subdue these militias, especially the Uzbek, the Tajik, the Hazaras, is going to be very difficult for anyone in Kabul. At the moment, for the Taliban to overrun the militias, to overrun the Afghan forces, and to move towards Kabul is nothing which can be visualized in the short term. It's going to make the situation there very fluid. There's going to be loss and gain of territory. It's going to be a completely slowly moving fluid battle where you may gain, lose, regain. The ultimate result is going to be destruction. It's going to be movement of refugees. It's going to be assassinations, suicide attacks. Afghanistan is going to go deep into trouble.
Right. Let's get back to Kabul and Islamabad. See, the government in Kabul, the Afghan government there, and the Pakistani government, they have never seen eye to eye. It's a love and hate relationship. You love to hate also, that kind of a relationship. So there's very little that is expected between them. But there are lots of reports that Islamabad is actually aiding the Taliban in its offensive in various districts, etc. Perhaps some of their troops are also involved. What do you have to say about this?
What is getting very evident and clear is that inputs that are flowing in from Afghanistan as well as from Pakistan tell you that Pak casualties are being brought back into from Afghanistan back into Pakistan. They're being buried in Pakistan. The fact this itself indicates that Pakistan is actively involved. There are also reports which state that the Pak SSG is fighting alongside the Taliban in a number of places. Again, it's a direct involvement. If you recollect a few days ago, when the Taliban had captured the border crossing with Pakistan and the Afghan government was planning to launch airstrikes, the Pakistan Air Force threatened the Afghan Air Force that if you come anywhere within range of the Pak borders, we will strike to support the Taliban. There are rumors flowing in that around Kandahar, the Pak Air Force is also getting active in some form of giving it support. There were reports of the Taliban possessing rockets which could carry anything up to about a 20 kg warhead, which again possibly would be given by Pakistan. So the involvement of Pakistan with the Quetta Shera, the Peshawar Shera, the fact that it is in Pakistan where the basis for training the Taliban exist, where the Taliban are treated for medical facilities, proof of which was evident in January this year, when the Taliban from Doha came to Pakistan for a visit, and they were shown moving around their own training camps, moving around hospitals where their people are being treated. So the support from Pakistan is very evident. And you can see the way the situation deteriorated when the moment the Afghan ambassador's daughter in Islamabad got kidnapped, Afghanistan withdrew its ambassador as well as senior diplomats. It has taken a worsening situation further down the drain. And Afghanistan is openly accusing Pakistan of not only supporting the Taliban with arms, ammunition, training, and funding it with finances, but it's also providing them manpower and support from its own forces. There was a report of a major of the Pakistan army caught by the Afghan forces carrying his identity card. Now, if this is the sort of reports that are coming in, it's evident that Pakistan is playing a very active role and hoping to terminate this war at an early date, which again is very, very unlikely.
Right. A point about the capabilities of the Afghan defense forces, whether they'll be able to last or they'll not be able to last. If you look at it, really, billions of dollars have been spent on the training of these Afghan forces by the Americans. Numerically, they're superior to, let us say, the Taliban. They are quite a big force to really contend with. But there are also reports that, well, you have a lot of exodus from the people leaving the forces. How do you expect the Afghan defense forces to, fare in this battle that's going on?
Firstly, if you look at even today, when the US is pulling out, it is training Afghan forces in Qatar, at their bases in Qatar. So therefore, the training still continues. The Afghan forces are very well equipped with weapons and equipment. They've been places where they've surrendered. There are places where they've been run over by the Taliban, but those are isolated places and isolated pickets. Or there are also reports where the locals have approached the Afghan forces and told them to surrender, that they've been promised money and that they would be sent back safe. This would ensure the security of locals. That happened until about a few weeks ago. You've got no such report of surrender of Afghan forces in the last few weeks, whereas you've been getting reports of them recapturing areas from the Taliban. So therefore, the Afghan forces have had their setbacks, but now it appears that they're regrouping, with the militias joining them in support as another defense line. The Afghan forces are getting further strengthened, especially around the provision capitals, which will actually hold the key to what Taliban can ultimately control at the end of the day. With nations willing to fund in and provide weapons and equipment to the Afghan forces, India is also supposed to have given them some amount of weapons and equipment. They are likely to be able to be a strong power to reckon with as far as the Taliban is concerned. The Taliban is not going to be able to wade into Afghanistan the way it did in the early 90s. You've got to remember that the militias only took over Kabul once the USSR collapsed. As long as the USSR was holding, the militias could not take over Kabul. The Taliban came in 1996. this time with the world backing the Afghan forces, it is unlikely that the Taliban is going to get a free run. It is unlikely that the Afghan armed forces will collapse the way they did then. It is going to be a very, very long, painstaking battle for the Taliban. Until they start showing their power by being able to take over provincial capitals, the Afghan forces are not going to give up easily. They are well equipped. Their very small air force is currently proving to be effective against the Taliban, which are out in the open.
Right. Next question, and that's my last question to you, General, is what about the Indian strategy? You see, what we hear about is something like you said just now, that we are sending weapons and equipment and ammunition to the government forces. Also, there are reports that we are talking to the Taliban. So there's a slight dichotomy perhaps over here. How do you think, what do you think rather should be our strategy at the moment and maybe a couple of months ahead?
We've got to understand that the Taliban and the Afghan government are two major stakeholders in the country. For any nation which is going to play a role in the future of Afghanistan, it has to be in communication with both. The level of what? Firstly, the Taliban has to be able to give India the confidence that it is not going to be anti-India. It is willing to work with India for its own development. India has no interest or commercial interest in Afghanistan. India will be a partner for the development of Afghanistan for its reconstruction. But if India is to be involved in reconstruction of Afghanistan, despite whoever is in power, the group or the government in power should start giving India the confidence that it is not going to be anti-India. It is going to be pro-India. It is not going to be hosting forces which are going to operate against Indian soil. It is going to permit India to reopen its consulates and is going to stand by India. It's only then that India would be involved in reconstruction. India is the other benefit which India can provide is the fact that with Chabahar port being developed by India, it provides an alternate route to Afghanistan. So as far as India is concerned, India is possibly the only nation with no commercial interest, no interest of exploiting Afghanistan, no interest of taking advantage of the country's current scenario. It is there to help, support, develop and build Afghanistan, basically to gain soft power, to build the Indian image in Afghanistan, and to develop the nation as a leading country in South Asia. Now, if this is to happen, India has to remain in touch with both countries. While we diplomatically support a political solution, we need to be prepared that a political solution may not occur. It may ultimately lead to a military solution, which could possibly lead to the country remaining in its current state of turmoil for a collection of years, or the country being overrun by one or the other party. So we've got to look at it in terms of maintaining network with both, maintaining communication with both, with the intention that whichever side is ultimately in the chair, India gains and India is able to support them in their reconstruction and development.
Right. Thank you, General. I think you've given us a very clear insight into what's happening inside Afghanistan. Otherwise, the general impression going around is that the Kabul government is losing a lot of ground. Like you said, they're losing ground, but they're losing ground at the peripheries. Not a single major city, nothing of military value has really been captured by Taliban. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for sparing the time, General.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you, viewers. Thanks for joining us, and do keep joining us now and then on bharatshakti.in, and you will find such interesting discussions.